The sky bled rust as the sun fell behind the jagged ridgeline, casting long shadows over a town that had forgotten how to pray. Dust swirled through the empty streets like ghosts looking for somewhere to rest. Wooden signs creaked on rusty hinges. No music played, no children laughed. Only the low hum of anticipation, the sick kind that clings to the ribs. Eli Cutter rode in slow, the way men do when they've got nowhere left to be. His horse was lean, his coat dust-worn and patched. He looked like trouble avoided him out of respect. His eyes were gray, not like the sky, but like cold iron dulled by sorrow. He didn't speak when he passed the blacksmith shop or the saloon. He didn't tip his hat. He wasn't there for pleasantries. He stopped when he saw the crowd. Misakan gathered in a crooked ring in the center of town. Women watched from porches, their arms folded, faces hard. Even the preacher stood among them, jaw set and eyes down. A wagon was parked near the well, and beside it stood a man with a whip coiled at his hip and cruelty resting easy on his smile. Boone Riggs. Eli knew the type. A man who wore his hat too low and his pride too loud. He was thick around the gut, red in the face, and wore a silver ring on every finger, like power was something he could buy. "Evening," Boone called out, his voice slick as snake oil. "We're taking bids tonight. Real special offering." Then came the silence. A woman stepped from the back of the wagon. Her hands were tied, dress torn, hair tangled and streaked with dust. But she stood tall, taller than shame allowed, and looked no one in the eye. In her arms, a boy, maybe 5, maybe younger, clung to her dress with the wide, watchful eyes of a child who's already seen too much. Boone placed a hand on her shoulder like she was livestock. "This here's Clara, strong back, decent. Cook. Mouth needs taming, but that's nothing a good belt won't fix. And the boy, he don't talk none. Won't be any trouble." Laughter rippled through the crowd, dry and sharp as gravel. Eli stayed where he was, dismounted without hurry, and leaned against the post outside the saloon. He didn't need to ask what was happening. A man like Boone wouldn't dare raise cattle but would sell off his wife and child like worn boots. Eli had seen things in his life. Blood in the snow, bodies hung from cottonwoods. But this had a weight to it that soured the air. Boone continued, slapping a calloused palm against his thigh. "Starting at $20. Don't be shy. Boys, she's already broken in." The first bid came from a man with gold teeth, then another from a rancher Eli recognized from up near Broken Mesa. Boone grinned. Clara didn't flinch. The boy hid his face against her side. Eli didn't know her, didn't know the boy. But something deep, buried and half dead, stirred inside him. Maybe it was the way she refused to cry. Maybe it was the way the boy never looked up. Or maybe it was the memory of a grave too far east, where a woman and a girl waited under wildflowers. He stepped forward. "50, he said, voice low but clear. Boone squinted. "Who said that?" Eli stepped into the ring, hand resting on the buckle of his belt. He didn't reach for his gun. Didn't have to. "I said 50, he repeated. A hush fell. Boone laughed, but it didn't carry right. "You got $50, stranger." Eli pulled a pouch from his coat, silver coins worn smooth. He dropped them into Boone's waiting hand. The moment held. Boone looked at the money, then at Eli, then at Clara. "Well," he said, forcing another laugh, "she's yours." Eli didn't move toward her. Not yet. He looked at Clara, and she looked back. Her eyes weren't grateful. They were cautious, angry even. Not at him, at the world. That made sense. "You're not cattle," Eli said. "You can ride if you want, or walk. I ain't got any chains." Clara didn't answer, but she stepped down from the wagon and kept the boy close. Boone tipped his hat like the devil giving a blessing. Hope she don't bite. Eli didn't reply. He turned and walked, slow as before, toward the livery. Clara followed, silent, the boy in her arms. The wind picked up then, scattering dust like ashes, whispering secrets no one wanted to hear. And, somewhere behind them, the crowd began to break, not from conscience, but because the show was over. As the saloon doors creaked behind him, Eli looked over his shoulder once. Not at Boone, but at the empty sky. He'd come to this town chasing nothing. He hadn't planned on staying. But something had changed. Eli Cutter hadn't spoken more than a dozen words since Clara and the boy started riding with him. He wasn't a man who needed to explain himself. His silences were heavy enough to carry meaning. But at night, when the fire cracked and the coyotes called from the ridges, he'd glance her way. And that was saying something. They camped just off the old cattle trail, where the trees thinned, and the stars came out bold. Clara kept her son close, tucking him beneath her shawl as though the wind might carry him off. She hadn't asked where they were headed, and Eli hadn't offered. Maybe they both understood the road itself was the only answer for now. The boy's name was Caleb. He hadn't spoken since the auction, not a word, but he watched everything, his eyes wide, dark, and still. Eli noticed how the boy never let his mother out of reach, not even when she stepped away to fetch water, not even in sleep. "You always carry that much silver?" Clara asked one night, her voice low but edged with something sharp. Eli didn't look up from the fire. "Not anymore." She nodded, then stared into the flames like they owed her something. "Why'd you do it?" He didn't answer right. Away. Just tossed another twig into the fire and watched it burn. Figured no one else would. Clara didn't thank him. He respected that. Gratitude was cheap out here, and he hadn't done it for praise. By the third day, they reached an abandoned line shack, nothing more than a roof with 4 stubborn walls. It would do for the night. As they settled in, Clara began boiling water, and sorting through a worn satchel that barely held a few clothes and an old broken brooch. Eli saw the bruise under her collarbone when her shawl slipped. He didn't ask about it. She didn't explain. But the air between them turned heavier. That night, she told him part of it. "Boone wasn't always like that," she said. "Used to read me poetry. Gave me this brooch when I told him I was carrying Caleb." Eli said nothing, just leaned back against the wall, arms folded. "He started drinking more after the drought," she continued. "When we lost the second crop, something snapped. Said it was my fault, that I was a curse. When Caleb cried, he'd lock him in the root cellar." Eli's jaw tightened, but his voice stayed even. "And your family?" "Dead," she said. "Or near enough. Mama passed during childbirth. Pa drank himself into the grave. My sister ran west when I was 15. Never came back." She fell silent, brushing Caleb's hair with her fingers. The boy had curled against her lap, small and still. "Sheriff never did a thing," she added after a pause. "Said Boone had rights. Called it a domestic matter." Eli stared out the window at the moon rising over the hills. He knew that kind of silence from lawmen. He'd seen it when his wife was taken sick, back in Missouri. The doctor hadn't come because they couldn't pay. By the time Eli got help, it was too late. His daughter followed soon after. Fever didn't care for fairness. Clara glanced at him. "You got family?" "Had." She didn't press. The wind outside howled through the cracks in the wall. "What are you planning to do now?" she asked. Eli stood and moved to the door, checking the dark for movement. "Keep moving, till it feels like I don't have to." Clara gave a bitter laugh. "That ever happen?" "Not yet." Something passed between them then. Not comfort, not quite trust, but the raw beginnings of it. Like 2 wolves circling. The same fire, unsure if the other means harm or not. The next morning, Caleb surprised them both. He tugged on Eli's coat, holding out a tin cup for water. Eli knelt, took the cup, and filled it from the canteen. The boy didn't speak, but he gave a slight nod, the kind that said more than words. Clara watched it happen. Her lips parted, just a little. Hope isn't loud when it returns. It's quiet, like a breath that doesn't hurt for once. They broke camp by dawn. As they rode, Eli noticed the way Clara sat straighter in the saddle, one hand on her boy's back. Not fearless, but no longer waiting for the whip. He knew Boone wouldn't let it go. Men like him didn't like being made fools of. But the road ahead stretched wide, and for now they had wind at their backs and fire in their blood. And sometimes, out here in the Badlands, that was enough to keep going. They reached Dry Creek Pass by the 7th day, a jagged slit between two bluffs where the trail narrowed to little more than a ledge. The wind funneled through the stone like a dying breath. Below, 100 feet of nothing waited to catch whoever slipped. Eli rode ahead, reins loose in one hand, eyes moving like clockwork, back and forth, scanning the cliffs. Something felt wrong. The quiet wasn't right. Even the birds had gone still. Behind him, Clara guided her mare with care, keeping Caleb pressed tight against her chest. She didn't ask questions, but Eli could feel her tension. She'd learned to trust silence the same way he had. They were halfway through the pass when the first shot rang out. Stone shattered near Eli's head. His horse reared, but he held firm, dropping low and drawing his pistol in a single motion. 2 more shots echoed, sharp, close. Clara screamed, ducking, her arms shielding Caleb. Eli saw movement above, a flash of a rifle, a man crouched behind rock. He fired once, and the figure vanished. "Back!" he shouted. "Ride!" But Clara's mare spooked and reared, refusing the path. Caleb clung to her like a second skin. Eli turned his horse, galloping back to them. Another shot sliced the eye, air grazing his sleeve. He felt the burn but didn't slow. He grabbed Clara's reins, pulled hard, forcing the mare to move. They rode fast, dirt and stone flying under hoof. The exit loomed ahead, where the cliffs dropped away and the trail widened. One last bullet struck the rock near Caleb's feet. Then silence. They didn't stop until they reached a line of scrub oak, far from the ridge. Eli dismounted first, pulled Clara and Caleb down, and crouched behind a rock, gun still drawn. His breath came fast but measured. Clara clutched Caleb, eyes wide. "Boone?" Eli nodded. "Had to be. Hired hands, maybe. He wouldn't come himself." "But how'd he know where we were going?" Eli looked away. "Only one place folks run when they've got nowhere else, north, toward the river towns. He didn't have to be smart, just patient." She sat on the ground, her dress torn. At the hem, her face pale and drawn. Caleb nestled against her, silent as ever. Eli's shoulder throbbed where the bullet had skimmed him, but he didn't mention it. Pain was familiar. What troubled him more was the look in Clara's eyes, like hope had turned around and left them behind again. That night, they found shelter in the burned-out remains of an old prospector's cabin. Charred beams still held up a roof. It wasn't much, but it kept out the wind. Eli wrapped his arm, wincing as he tightened the cloth. Clara watched him. "You could have left me there, back in town, or after the first shot." Eli didn't answer. He focused on the bandage, but after a moment he said, "You ever wonder what makes a man turn cruel?" She didn't respond. "I think it's fear," he said. "Fear of losing something, or never getting what he thought he was owed. Makes him dangerous." Clara stared into the dark. Boone was scared of being nothing. He hated quiet. Always needed someone to blame. Eli nodded. "That kind. Don't stop," Not until someone puts them in the ground. There it was, the truth laid bare, like bones under dry earth. They knew Boone would come again. He hadn't bought Clara for money. He'd bought her for control. And she'd slipped from his fingers. That wound wouldn't heal in him. It would fester. "What are we going to do?" she asked quietly. Eli stood and stepped to the doorway, rifle in hand. "We'll be ready next time." Clara's voice was barely a whisper. "You'll kill him?" Eli didn't look back. "If he makes me." The next morning, Caleb spoke for the first time. As Eli saddled the horses, the boy walked up and touched his sleeve. "You won't let him take us, will you?" Eli knelt slowly. "No, son, I won't." Caleb didn't say anything more. He didn't have to. The fire in his eyes told the rest. As they rode out, the sky turned heavy with clouds. A storm was coming. But Eli didn't mind. He welcomed it. Let it rain. Let the world shake. He had something to protect now. And some things were worth the blood they cost. The sun dipped low behind the ridgeline, casting long, blood-colored shadows across the canyon floor. Dust swirled in lazy circles as the last wind of the day settled into silence. Eli stood beneath the scorched sycamore, boots planted firm, rifle slung low. Across from him, Boone Harridan dismounted with the swagger of a man who thought himself invincible. Clara stood a few paces behind Eli, one hand on Caleb's shoulder, the other gripping the old pistol Eli had given her just that morning. They sighed. Boy didn't flinch. Not anymore. Boone spit into the dirt, smirking. "You really think you can keep what's mine?" Eli didn't move. "She ain't yours. Never was." Boone's face twitched, just a flicker, but Eli saw it. "I paid for her fare, Cutter, in gold. That makes her and the boy mine by law." Eli stepped forward, voice flat. "There ain't a law west of the river that can stomach what you did, what you are." Boone laughed, low and bitter. "And what are you now, Eli? Some kind of savior?" "No," Eli said. "Just tired of men like you walking away clean." The air cracked, quick as lightning, loud as judgment. Boone drew first, but not fast enough. Eli's bullet caught him in the gut. The second hit his shoulder before he could cry out. He dropped, clawing at the dust like it might save him. Eli approached slow, rifle aim steady. Boone writhed, blood seeping through his shirt, eyes wide with disbelief. You'll hang for this," he wheezed. "Maybe," Eli muttered, "but you won't hurt them again." A final shot echoed across the rocks, and Boone stopped moving. The silence that followed was heavy, but clean. A kind of peace settled in Eli's bones, one he hadn't felt since before Missouri, before everything burned. Clara walked forward, her hand still trembling, but her eyes locked on Boone's body with a calm that bordered on sacred. "You think that's the end of him?" she asked. Eli lowered the rifle. "It's the end of what he could take." Caleb stepped beside his mother. His small fingers found hers, squeezing once. She looked down at him, then up at Eli, and something unspoken passed between them. Not gratitude, not relief. Something harder, something earned. They buried Boone beneath a stack of shale rock, unmarked. The desert would eat him soon enough. Later, as the stars began to show, they sat by the fire. Caleb leaned against Eli's leg, fast asleep, while Clara stitched the frayed edge of her shawl in silence. "I ain't good with words," Eli said finally, "and I don't know what comes next." Clara looked at him, needle paused midair. "We keep writing, keep choosing." "To where?" She shrugged. "Somewhere with trees, maybe water." He nodded. "You ever been east?" She smiled faintly. "Once. Saw a river so wide it looked like the ocean." "We could try that." Her hands stilled. "You'd come with us?" Eli didn't look at her, just added another stick to the fire. "Only if I'm welcome." She didn't speak. just reached for the coffee pot and poured him a tin cup. Passed it to him slow. The answer was in the gesture. The night deepened. Coyotes howled in the far distance, but none came near. The wind was kind now, brushing over the land like a lullaby. Eli watched the flames and thought of his wife, his daughter, the graves left behind. The ghosts were quieter tonight. Maybe they'd found peace in what he'd done, or maybe he'd just finally stopped running. Clara shifted closer, her shawl brushing his arm. You think folks like us ever really get to start over? Eli took a sip of the coffee. Maybe not clean, but new? Yeah. She leaned her head against his shoulder. It wasn't romance, not yet. Just two weary souls choosing to stand close against the dark. And in the stillness of the desert, with the fire crackling and the stars blinking down, that was enough. Because out here, the wind don't carry prayers. But sometimes, it remembers mercy.